Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Author Summaries, where we go deep with the world's brightest minds and biggest thinkers. Today's episode, which is sponsored by WeHelpAuthors.com, is truly special. I'll be interviewing someone who has changed my life as well as the way entrepreneurs think and grow forever. Dan Sullivan, the founder of Strategic Coach and the author of legendary books like The Self-Managing Company, Who Not How, and so many others. If you've ever dreamed of building a business that gives you more freedom, more creativity, and more results, this conversation is going to be a game changer for you. We're diving deep into how you can create a company that runs itself so you can spend your time doing what you love and what you're best at. Dan's wisdom isn't just for big companies, it's for anyone who wants a bigger future, whether you're just getting started or you're already running a multi-million dollar enterprise. I can't wait for you to hear the insights, the strategies, and honestly, the mindset shifts that happen just by being in Dan's presence. So buckle up. This is an episode you're going to want to save, re-listen to, and share with everyone you know who's serious about building something bigger than themselves. Let's jump in. Glad you're here, and I'm excited to dig into probably my favorite book, although there are many. It'd be an impossible task to put them in order of my favorites, but the self-managing company, I feel, has
Mm.
made the biggest impact of my life. So that's where the one I chose to go over. And for anybody that's watching this versus listening, you can see I've got 50 of Dan's books behind me on the shelf. And you are one of the very few authors in the world that I read everything I can get my hands on that you write. So it's all so valuable, and you take the complex and make it simple. So
Thank you very much.
So again, I have all these books. I read everything that you write, at least try to. How many books have you written altogether?
uh, I wouldn't have known that, but there was a request in last week, and I think I'm just sending number 60 to the publisher right now, 60. So, yeah.
Congrats. Wow.
And I've written actually probably more than that. I've created some quarterly series which were 8.5 by 11, but they were like 40 pages, which
Oh,
if
wow.
you converted them would probably qualify as a book. So
Yeah.
might be pushing close to 100 right now.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Amazing. So, and each one's just packed with value, and so they've changed
Mhm.
my life. And
Thank you, Dave.
um, so for anybody that is listening that isn't aware of who Dan Sullivan is, he's the like, are you founder or co-founder of Strategic Coach?
Co-founder. Yeah.
Co-founder of Strategic Coach, and it's a program that I credit for saving my life. Not, physically, but I would have,
True for me too.
yeah, I would have wasted my life chasing the buck and doing things that I'm lousy at and didn't find fascinating. So, Strategic Coach gave me the wake up call, not only the wake up call, but the direction to actually make the shifts to work towards a self-managing company and company that I love, and uh, always finding more and more fascinating with a brighter future. And that all goes right back to what I learned sitting there in Strategic Coach and directly from you as well. And so thank you for all of that.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Well, it's very interesting. Um, it was actually a little bit of a joke that got me started on this book because, I I used to market a lot. I would be at conferences and I would be, at industry industry seminars back in the 90s, especially. And I said, I'm just going to say some words, and I want to know if this is what you would all like to have. And I said, a self-managing company, and all the hands went up like that. And I said, is there anyone who doesn't want to have a self-managing company? And there were very few, and they were just trying to pull my chain, if they did that. But the what put me onto this, so I've been an entrepreneur myself, Dave, since 1974, so August of 74. And And I just had a guess that coaching for entrepreneurs might be something that would be a growing business, and back then entrepreneurs were still sort of marginal creatures. They weren't the center of the economy. Like if you look at the companies that are now the top 10, let's say they would be the top 10 corporations now, but at one time they were just a couple people or a small group of people who did that. And the big shift with that was technology. It was the introduction of the microchip and then the personal computer and then everything that's followed from the personal computer. And what I realized is that people weren't looking for management; they were looking for coaching. Each individual entrepreneur had ideas, but they had, in many cases, too many ideas, and they were busy, and for the most part, too busy. And they just jumped in the pool. They didn't necessarily work out a structure and a process for um, making satisfying regular progress, and they could see themselves growing. So that's really what I went after. That was the role that I've played, and my guess was a good guess, and my bet was a good bet, and the payoffs have been good too.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. So, um, you begin the book talking about a concept that I've watched a lot, and it's almost counterintuitive. Almost everybody starts their business for freedom, and somewhere along the line they get sucked in and they wind up, you know, I love the quote that an entrepreneur is the guy that'll work 80 hours a week to avoid the 40-hour job, and so we make all these decisions and we make all these moves for freedom, and then we wind up, if you're not intentional about it, having way less freedom as an
Mhm.
entrepreneur. But
Yeah,
you teach things in this book and in your programs that help us correct that. First of all, recognize it and then make the little
yeah.
shifts that need. So will you go into that a little bit?
So, Dave, just a little history here. What was your jump into entrepreneur land? What was that?
My very first jump was a
Job
mobile.
or this is a jump, not a job.
Yeah, yeah. It was a the first one that I had on my own was a mobile detailing business, and and I wound up hiring a couple of kids that went out and did the details and everything. And I had no systems in place, so they'd come back and all the supplies were, all the towels were filthy, the shop vac was full, like they were covered in, grime from head to toe, and say, well, we didn't really do any work today. and so that was the first wake up call that, I need some systems in place to track the jobs and what they're actually doing and all that. So yeah, I went in with no entrepreneurial experience, but both my parents were entrepreneurs, and um so I got some guidance along the way. But
Yeah, I think I would say that that would be true for me too. What you just described.
yeah.
Um, uh, and we all have some sort of skill that's marketable. Yeah, to give you the confidence just to go. It's a tough decision to become an entrepreneur. Very few do, and the vast majority don't stick with it when they try it. I think it's one in 5 years. It's like 1 in 10 out of 10 people who try, and then and the big thing was that since most of the educational system has been put together by people who aren't entrepreneurs. As a matter of fact, in some cases, hostile to entrepreneurs. Um, there, there hasn't really been any real structure that I've seen over the years. I mean, you go to the University of Arizona State, which is close by to you. They obviously have entrepreneurial program there. But if you look at the people who are teaching, generally they aren't entrepreneurs themselves. And I think a certain amount of entrepreneurism can be recorded. It can be captured in a book. But it's for me, if you don't understand what was the original motivation to be an entrepreneur, and probably the structure or process that you lay out for someone to be an entrepreneur isn't going to be the right path. And so you brought up the issue that it's really for freedom that you become an entrepreneur. And and I've coached, approximately, if I put them all together from the 1970s up until now, over 7,000 entrepreneurs firsthand, where I would have lots of questions about what they were doing, how they were going about it. And over the years, I've kind of put it together that there's like an 80% that is really the same for all entrepreneurs. And then you have a 20%, which is just peculiar to the particular business that you're in, like detailing, mobile HVAC. There's lots of people who do that kind of work. And entrepreneurism has really exploded over the years. But it all comes from four freedoms. The first freedom is that you actually give up a safe job, if there is such a thing. You give up, a set path where somebody gives you a job, they give you a structure, they give you a process. But it's not your time. You give up your time for that. Okay, so one of the things the entrepreneur wants is that I want to be in control of my time. Okay, when I get up in the morning, I want the day be my choice. I want the purpose of the day. I want the payoff from the day. I want that all within my power. And I think that's the number one freedom that keeps entrepreneurs being free is time. So, what did you notice when you got started? What happened to your time?
Uh, so
Did you have a family then?
yeah, yeah. So had my wife, not my daughter yet. So yeah, it was about 30 years ago, I guess. So um yeah, not quite that, 25, 30. But yeah, and I've done it repeatedly. So I've started several companies, and Uh, I start out where the hours don't matter because I'm fascinated and I love it. And you know, I'd rather be working on the business than seeing a movie or doing something, a hobby or something. Like I'm just passionate and loving every second of it. And then I don't realize when that starts slowing down that I should so I fall in that trap repeatedly. But the difference is now I catch myself. Now I go,
Mhm.
oh, I'm in the trap. I need to schedule time to, to
Yeah,
rebuild and rejuvenate and,
yeah. Yeah,
so
so one of the things that we created a different kind of calendar in Strategic Coach, and it's I had a background a little bit in entertainment before I became an entrepreneur, theater, and one of the things I notice about the entertainment world, which today also includes sports, so everybody's in the entertainment world, is that they have a time structure, a way of um, uh, designing their days, which is really radically different from the general public. Okay, general public has work days, they have weekends, they have holidays, they have vacation days. So in our system, they're in the 365 days of the year, there's just three kinds of days, and they each have an energetic dimension about them. And the first one is free days. Okay, and I use the same logic with free days as a financial. If you had a financial advisor, they would have a category called savings. And if savings isn't first, there are no savings. And in our time system,
yeah.
if there's no free time, if there are no free days, there is no free time. It doesn't come off the bottom, it has to come off the top. And that was very controversial when we first started back in the 70s and 80s. What do you mean free days? You can get those on weekends. And I said, well, I don't know what a weekend is. Okay. I know the 7 days of the week, and in our system, you only have three choices for the days. The one is the free day, and the way that it works in our system, you look at the calendar, January 1st, you look through to 12 months, and you say, okay, so I'm just going to right ahead lay out all the days during the next 12 months that are going to be free days, and I put them on the calendar, and I think they're in green. They're in green, free days. And then the next day we have is a focus day, and a focus day is a work day. The next 2 days are work days, focus day and buffer day. But the focus day is purely about making money and profitable money. So the whole emphasis is I'm going to have a certain day, and it may be only 1 day a week, maybe 2 days a week. But in that day, I don't do anything. It's not free time, and it's not what using an entertainment term, it's not a backstage day. You know, you're out, you're meeting with people who will pay you, okay, and you're doing work that you get paid for, and you want that work to be profitable. Or so when you were first introduced to that, just the first 2 days, and I'll talk about the buffer day
Yeah.
in just a second. What'd that do to your thinking? Because I've got 365 days, and there's only three possibilities for each one of them. But
Yeah.
the first two are free day or focus day.
A few things really knocked me back in my chair when I first learned that. One was putting the free days first. Didn't make any sense. I was like, no, 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 you got to grind and earn your free day. And you said, no, 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 you have the free day first so that you are rested and rejuvenated so you can do your best work. So that was a
Mhm.
huge paradigm shift for me. Um, that really changed a lot. And then uh, the way you just define a free day is also very interesting and really made me get real honest with myself that I believe you define it as midnight to midnight with nothing work related at all. So for me, it probably took me
That would include looking at this.
yeah, the
Actually,
phone, reading a business book.
a lot of people in Strategic Coach have two phones. They have a free day phone, and
Yeah,
then they have a phone for everything else. So the iPhone is really the main enemy of free days because people say, "Well, I see if I got an email or something like that." But the moment that you're connected that way, you're at work. You're
yeah,
not really free. And
yeah.
did you find it hard because
It's a great point.
you had entrepreneurial parents? I bet they.
Hard. I find it impossible. I don't know if I've truly taken a free day yet. 5 days,
Looks like
5 years later.
well, you're not
Uh,
having one today because you're talking to me.
exactly, exactly. It always finds a way to sneak in. Um, and so that's like you guys teach us, putting it on the calendar first, that this is going to be a free day, and then actually intentionally scheduling rejuvenating fun activities. Because if you just leave it blank of I'm going to take a day off, I'll bet everything I have you're not going to. You have to plan, you
Mhm.
have to fill that time or it'll get filled,
Yeah,
is what
yeah.
I've been learning. So and I recently, so I got a new iPhone and a new MacBook, and I purposely didn't do the clone thing where they drag all your old stuff to the new one. I set it up so that, like Joe Polish says, I want my phone working for me, not me being a slave to the phone. And so I did it very strategically of what I put on there and where, and that I can't check email and I can't check Facebook Messenger and all the things that suck me in just because I
Mhm.
have a little time to kill. And then my new MacBook is a secondary computer, and I made it impossible to get interrupted. There is no app, no notification, nothing can pop up and pull me out of my flow.
Mhm.
So I'm very, very intentional with that.
Yeah,
And so it's seems like a unnecessary expense, but it's changing my life. So
yeah,
it's allowing me to actually follow. So we talked about the free days a little bit. The focus
yeah.
days I
And
can
the
always improve.
focus day, and
And then,
I like to simplify everything for the entrepreneur. And one of the things is that entrepreneurs do a lot of different things. So say when you you take a quarter, let's take 3 months. And if you did a inventory of all the different activities, different kinds of activities that you would do during the 3 month period, it wouldn't be unusual for someone to have 30 different activities there. You know, some of them are everyday activities, but there are some they happen once a week. There's other things that during the quarter. Now, one of the things is that you're not good at all those activities, and it's very important. So we do it as a series of columns, and happens very when someone joins Strategic Coach. This is one of the first. Your activity inventory is the first thing,
Mhm.
and then you classify them. So there's activities that you're incompetent at, but for one reason or another, it was necessary for you to do these because you didn't have somebody else to do them, and and if you don't do them, you get into trouble, so one way or another. Then there's activities you're competent at. Incompetent, you're just never going to be good at it. Competent, you could actually make a living doing this, and but it's not nourishing kind of work. I mean, emotionally and psychologically, it's not, you don't get any energy from it. And it actually does tire you out. It actually worries you. And I travel. I know a lot of people think that they want to have a private jet, as we go along, and entrepreneurs have jet. And I never will. And the reason is I like going to airports, and I like the crowds, and I like watching people. And I would say that the vast majority of people I see passing through airports don't know what they're doing, don't know what their status is. But I bet they're only competent at what they do. And if you're only competent at the work you're doing, it means that you're hustling just to keep your job. You're just hustling. Now there's a third category, and that's called excellent. You're not incompetent, you're not competent, you're excellent. You're above average, you're way above average, and you're making really good money with this. But still somebody else is controlling your time for the most part. Okay. And this is the real trap in most entrepreneurs' um, life and in their business part of their life and their personal part of their life. It's because they're really excellent and the pay is really good. However these could be entrepreneurs or not entrepreneurs, but they're always on the phone. They're always hustling. And my sense is that their calendar is 365 work days. 365. I mean, I had one. It was a very, very striking. It just shows you how funny this can get. Is that he got married, and within the first year, I think it was a year later, they had their first child, and they had him baptized. And it was at baptism, and he got a business called Baptism. And he said to his wife, "This is really important. I have to go." And he stepped outside the church. And I said, "Yeah, but didn't you stand up in front of a whole bunch of people one night and said that she was really important? And didn't you say that your child was really important?" And I said, "You were given a test, which was most important, and you opted for
Wow.
the payphone, And
Mm.
he said it was 5 years before his wife forgave him for that. For
Wow.
that,
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. It's,
And it's I tell the story because it's a drastic story, but it just shows how um, your priorities, the work-life priorities, can be so powerful that there isn't anything else important. It's just the
yeah.
business.
Yeah.
But and then the fourth one, so you have incompetence, you have competence, is unique. You just have an ability where um, one is you're you're way above average. I mean, uh, they put you at the top when people say in terms of uh, what your top is. Give an example. Your Our mutual friend Joe Polish. Um, uh, I've been in his program. I've been in his program since 2011. So this is my 14th year. And hands down, he's the greatest interviewer I've ever met in my life. I think Joe is just
Oh yeah.
unbelievable
Yeah.
at what he does. I don't see his match. Okay. And so we were going to Genius Network, and I noticed that if it was the big conference that happens near the end of the year, he's got three or 400 people there, and he's got
Yeah.
great guest speakers. That the only thing that I find interesting is when Joe is actually interviewing someone on stage. Okay, and he's just got this incredible ability to make the person feel really confident and comfortable, but he just extracts things from them. And he does his homework too. I mean, Joe does
Yeah.
enormously good preparation, but the whole energy level of the room goes through the roof. And so we attend the smaller groups during the year, Genius Network. And I think it was about a year and a half ago, I said, Joe, I don't think you should allow anyone to speak at Genius Network unless you're interviewing them. And all of a sudden, every one of those sessions just went through the roof because Joe is
Yeah.
so good at this. But he controls the structure, he controls the context. The person's there to pitch, but Joe won't let them pitch.
Yeah.
He'll ask questions. So that's a real great example of Joe now where he is in his life. I think he's 57 this year,
Yeah.
or he's 57. But he could build the rest of his life on that one capability. And then there's lots and lots of different kinds of dimensions. He's created, they all get recorded. He's got a podcast series now where he's recorded, and he's just organized his life around that one central activity. My feel is that every entrepreneur has that one sort of thing that we've just identified with Joe. And Joe gets energy out of it, so he could do interviewing all day, and he wouldn't be tired at the end. And
Yeah.
that's really the center of the strategic coach approach to entrepreneurism is that you have this unique ability. So you look at it, there's this big circle that represents everything in your business, but right in that center circle is this one amazing unique ability, and then lots of other dimensions that flow out of that. And so on a focus day, we want you just in that one activity, on a focus activity. And that brings up the whole question, well, the business requires lots of other activities. And so who does them? And I said, now we're talking about the self-managing company. Okay.
Yeah.
And before I go deeper into that, I'm just going to go into the third day. So I have free days, you have focus days, and the others are buffer days, and I call them backstage days. Like what would be backstage activities? This wouldn't be your main activity. You're not with clients or you're not with customers. You're not with the people who write the checks.
Yeah. Working with the team or creating some forms or procedures and the
Yeah,
maintenance, I guess, the
learning.
and setting up for the focus
Yeah,
day.
yeah. And you might be acquiring new skills, especially I notice a lot of people
Yeah.
are in AI, artificial intelligence
Yeah.
world, and they're playing with things. Well, that's not free time because you're intending it for work, and it's not a focus day because you're not doing it for money on that particular day. You're just trying to, improve your skill level and capability level, and and everything like that. So the big thing now, once we've reached this point, is saying, well, what does a self-managing company mean? It means that an entrepreneur on January 1st can lay out, let's say, at a low point, maybe 50 days that are going to be free days during the year. Okay. And this is flexible. You have 365 days. Every day has to be a free day, focus day, or a buffer day. And you put 50 and say, yeah, and I want 150 focus days. These are money making. So I got a 50 free, 150 focus. Then by necessity, the third day is backstage day. And as you go along, you learn this one quarter, first quarter, you're not so good at it. Second quarter, you get better. Third quarter, and I have clients who are my longest continuous client started with me in July of 1987. I've seen him every quarter since July of 1987, so 38 years.
Yeah.
And he learned it in his first year, the free focus and buffer, and now he'll probably run 6 or 7 marathons this year, where he goes and he does lots of things he enjoys. But his schedule at the beginning of the year, 365 days, he knows what each of those days
Wow.
is meant to be.
Hmm.
So the big thing then is how can, I'll give you mine. Mine's been the same for 28 years. I take 155 free days a year. That's equal to 22 weeks, 7-day weeks. Those are all in the calendar on January 1st. I know exactly when they're going to be. And then the focus day, I have roughly about 180 focus days. And my focus days have changed a little bit because I used to be just coaching. I was coaching and I was getting paid for coaching, or I was marketing and I was getting, occupied with getting future checks.
Yeah.
And then I have only 35 buffer days, and my buffer days are just hanging out with the team,
Okay.
you know, hanging out with the team. And and when it comes to focus days, it's 80% of the time. So if you put in 10 hours, eight of those hours were for making money, making money time. And then I have such great teamwork around me right now. You know, I have a self-managing company that's 35 days. And we've been pretty, I would say 95%. This is Bab Smith, my partner, my wife, my business partner. I would say we're probably 90% good on the way we lay out our years and have them happen that way. You know,
Yeah.
yeah. And the interesting thing about this is I'll be 81 in a few weeks. I'll be 81, and I am at my most productive ever. I mean, I've never been so productive, and I just have in any situation that I'm in the work, there's a team member there who's making sure that I'm just freed up just to focus on what Dan does best, and that's why I became an entrepreneur.
I've you've taught me millions of things, and possibly one of my all-time favorites is when you said that everybody's job was to free up Dan.
Yep,
Because
in
if
the
Dan's
company.
free, he's making the magic and creating new
Yep,
things and everything else. And so I took that lesson and I continually try to apply it.
yeah. Well, and every reward comes with a cost, and but so for example, I except for Genius Network and a great regenerative health mastermind group with Richard Rossi, Richard.
Yeah, yeah,
And then we have Abundance 360, which is a technology.
yeah.
I wouldn't be involved in any other business related activity in the course of a year except those
Wow.
three things. So, and people say, you should be out, you should be mingling. And I said, no, but you're out and about, but do you have a self-managing company? I said, I've got a self-managing company. I don't have to be around out and about
Yeah.
doing, yeah,
So I want to ask you a question, but first I want to point out something that you and your team did a great job of explaining to me, and then I want to make sure the listeners know when you speak about that unique ability, like and you use Joe Polish as the example, his unique ability is interviewing people and asking the right questions and everything. And I'm sure he knows it now, but he probably didn't know that was his unique ability. And the tip that really flipped the script for me was when I asked other people what they thought my unique ability was, because it's almost we're so good at it that we figure everybody else must be also. because it comes so naturally. It doesn't feel like work. It's effortless. So we tend to discredit it and not value it as much. But
Mhm.
once you're really clear on what your unique ability is, that's when the real magic just opens
Mhm.
wide up. So
Mhm. Yeah, and fortunately, Dave, we live in an age where there's so much opportunity, and there's so many different ways of making money that uh, that, for example, if I compare now to 50 years ago, when I first started my coaching business, um, uh, there's just so many things today that can be taken care of by other people that didn't even exist 50 years ago. You know, I mean, technology is the obvious thing that's happened that's strikingly different. But I know a lot of people who they work for their technology. Their technology doesn't work for them. They're at the beck and call of, the watch, the phone, or their laptop. And I think the big question is, as an entrepreneur, you have freedom of time. What do you want to do with if your time was really free and you had all the time, both at work and in your personal life? What would you do with it? And a lot of them don't really have any feel for that. And so one of the things that's happened, because I have more than 50 coach clients who are more than 30 years in the program. They've come every quarter for 30 years. And they had to, almost to a person, they had to actually create their personal life. They didn't actually have a personal life. Okay. It was just they were too tired to work. That they called that a free day, or it was forced socialization. They had family they had to visit, and friends they had to visit, and everything like that. And my sense is you have to have a real clear picture of what you want your future to be, to get the time, freedom of time really right. So my goal is never to retire. I mean, there's no possibility of that retiring. There is a possibility of dying, but there's not a possibility of retiring. So I would say, what what is the purpose of your entrepreneurial life? You want to be an entrepreneur, but what's the real purpose of that entrepreneurial life? And the only satisfactory answer that I've really heard is where you're using your skills to make life better for someone else. That's the only that's the only thing. If that's not true, if it's simply for making the money, you will retire because you're going to
yeah.
get tired. You're not getting enough reward from the activity
Mm.
to do it. If you got enough money, there's no reason for you to do it. So there's a real deep philosophical thing about entrepreneurism that at 80, I'm a lot more useful to a lot more people than I was when I was 50, than I was when I was 30. And that gets me out of bed every morning. That gets me excited about doing something new today because it's going to impact on other people's lives.
Yeah.
So, uh, yes, everybody would like to have a self-managing company, but um, they don't really need a self-managing company. You
Mm.
know, you want a self-managing company so that you're freed up, so that what you have to provide to other people, preferably check writers,
Yeah.
is that. So I'm really enormously devoted to that entrepreneurs should be free. So that's my life purpose. New tools, new thinking tools, new concepts,
Yeah.
and everything like that. So, yeah.
Jump back to the beginning real quick. Something just popped into my head that really stopped me in my tracks as I was rereading it was that you said it's right there in the name, self-employed. You're still employed. You're just employed by yourself. And that's where I think so many of us stop. We think we're free, we're not. And so
Yep.
that's, leads right into the self-managing company. And then you once I thought, hey, I'm really excited, I'm getting close, I got knocked back down a peg when I heard about the self-thriving company where it
Mhm.
thrives and grows without you.
Mhm. Yeah.
So do you need a self-managing
Yeah,
company
well,
first?
yeah, I think the distinction here, Dave, is that if nothing happens when you're not there,
Hmm.
you just have a job. You don't
Yeah,
have a company, you
yeah.
know. And and the other thing about this is going back to the activity inventory. If I had 30 activities in a quarter, if I didn't do three of them, which would be the three that the company wouldn't move forward unless I was doing these three activities.
Oh, wow.
And one of them I'm doing right now. Podcasting is a big part of it's a big part of my life. I love it because I like conversation. Almost all my podcasts are with other people, so I love doing that. But I have eight different series of podcasts, and we do about 160 a year. This is one of my
Oh, wow.
160 for the year.
Yeah.
And we know that enormous numbers of people become aware of Strategic Coach and the ideas of Strategic Coach as a result of watching the podcast. So that's a huge activity on my part. And I love doing it. I mean, I know a lot of people thought COVID was a terrible thing, but I'm very thankful for COVID because um, I would have loved doing what I'm doing right now, the podcast. I would have loved being able to do that 50 years ago, but it took COVID to get there to be enough people at the other end
Yeah.
that were actually watching it. And I just want to go back over the freedom. I did freedom of time. Freedom of time is what allows you to have freedom of money. Okay. And freedom of money means that quantitatively, you've got, the money's really good. The money just pays for a lot of things. Because if if you don't want to pay with your time, you've got to pay with other people's time, and you've got to write a check for a
Mm.
team. So I have, around me, I probably have, if I take all my activities, there's probably about 30 people in our company. We have 120 in our company, and
Yeah.
about a third of them, my life really, really depends upon the skills of those other 30 people.
Mm.
You know, this would be workshops, this would be books, this would be podcasts. Those would be the three, creating new tools,
Yeah.
creating new thinking tools for the program. Yeah. So, but I'm the freest right now that I've ever been in my life at 81. But I'm
Wow.
still working the same number of hours. And I'm still putting time. It's just that the time spent is worth a lot more. And then the third one is freedom of relationship. Do you get to work with just people you like working with,
Yeah.
inside your company, outside your company? And the fourth one is freedom of purpose. And I hit upon that. I want to create hundreds and hundreds of thinking tools for
Yeah.
entrepreneurs who want to be free. That's my goal.
Well, and I think your ripple effect, I can't even fathom. You said you have 7,000 that you've directly coached, but you have hundreds of thousands that your coaches have coached. And then every person that's been coached is helping others and
Yeah.
making an impact. So it's
No, it's
unfathomable. You're
real,
changing the
real.
world.
Yeah, and other people have created programs. I mean, Joe, he created a program, and then I couldn't um, focus our program on the things that Joe focuses on. So
Yeah.
I'm a member of his program. I'm a customer, and then Richard Rossi with his wonderful podcasts on regenerative medicine. Peter Diamandis with his amazing, he's a real pathfinder in the technology world.
Yeah.
So, and I would say probably there's hundreds of programs that have been created by our strategic coach clients where,
Yeah.
and I think they've taken a lot of their cues from the way that we do it.
Yeah. Yeah. So let me ask you about that because there's a, I'm learning now that there's a huge difference between knowing about something and knowing it. And
Mhm.
so, um, for instance, like you can read, the book that I'm talking about now, The Self-Managing Company has a lot of things in there like gap and the gain and stuff. And then you could read a whole book on gap and the gain. Then you can read the book you did with Ben Hardy that's, a couple hundred pages long of gap and the gain, and then you can be in a workshop and learn about gap and the gain. And they're all different
Mhm.
levels of knowing, air quotes,
Mhm.
the same concept
Mhm.
where you could explain the concept, and I'll let you do that here in a minute in a couple of sentences. But the more you go deep into it, the more potential it has for
Mhm.
exponentially changing your life. And so
Mhm.
how do you get people to realize that the difference of that gap, to use the term gap in the game, but like that they think, oh, I read about that, I know it all. And really they're just scratching the surface, and you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
So like,
Yeah, well, there's a difference between theory and practice,
yeah.
and I think a lot of education as it exists today, and I'll use education in general, not entrepreneurs. It's a teacher in front of the room uh, who's teaching you what they've been taught. They're passing on. This is what I learned. I'm passing on, but it's not practice. It's not practice. They're not doing the thing that they're teaching. They're doing, and
Mm,
our workshops really are about um, the entrepreneur doing some thinking about a specific part of their life. For example, I just did a really great new tool. It's called Best Guesses and Bets. Okay. And I say to the entrepreneurs, I said, um, I'm going to make a statement here that the future is just a guess and a bet. In other words, the future that you're seeing, the future that you're working towards, and everything, it's a guess and a bet. And the reason is everything that got you here as an entrepreneur was a guess and a bet. And what I'd like you to do is brainstorm some of the best guesses and bets that you've made so far in your life that got you to where you are. And I give them a couple of minutes and they just brainstorm. I say, now pick the top three. Pick the top. I actually had them pick the top five. And I say, so what was the guess? What was the guess? For example, when I started coaching in 1974, I had a guess that one is that there was going to be a real growth of entrepreneurism because of the um, computer, the microchip technology, and then personal computers. And and I only went bankrupt twice before I found out that that was a good bet, good bet. And then, but it's created a 50-year company. I mean, 50 or 36 with the workshops, and just tremendous payoff for it. And then meeting Babs, I needed a partner in life. I had been married once before, which I call my practice marriage, and now I'm married, and it's just the greatest thing to be in partnership with her. But she's also the person who runs the company. She's the one who said, "You got to free up Dan." Okay, so
mm,
everything like that. So
yeah.
I do that exercise and a knockout, and then I say, what was the guess? What was the bet? And what was the payoff? Okay, and then I have them go into groups. Um, some of it's on Zoom, so they'll go into a Zoom group, breakout group, or it's in a workshop, and they pull their chairs, three or four, get together, and they talk about it. And the thing is that I'm not the one telling them this is. I'm simply giving them a structure for them to understand, oh, my life's been about guesses and bets. And then all of a sudden, within about a half hour later, they said, I never realized that it's all a guess and a bet. And I said, yeah, it is.
Wow.
It is. But they got that insight not from me. They got in that insight from just identifying five of their experiences. And then I say, so if we were to look ahead 20 years, what are some big guesses now
Mm,
that you think you'll bet on over the next 20 years? And from morning till night, Dave, I'm not preaching at them. I'm not lecturing them. I'm simply saying, I'm going to give you a sheet of paper. It's got boxes on it. And in this column, I want you to fill in this. In this column, it's all their experience.
yeah.
So unless your education is not about their experience, it's just a theory. It's just a theory. It's not real. You know, you can. say anything you want to them, but if it doesn't, they haven't identified the experience that they can improve. It's just theory, it's not practice. And
Yeah.
entrepreneurs are good at that. I mean, entrepreneurs really are um, self-teachers. They're they teach from that, but they like having structure. They like having process. So we create structure and process for them to do the best job of utilizing the experience they already have, so that they can do better in the future.
Mm.
Yeah.
That's it's funny when you say that. That's where so much of the magic of the program for me came out was, like Chad, my coach, said, like, Dave, you bring everything you need to strategic coach. We just figure out how to get it out and make it work. And it really is true that, when you look at things differently, the way that your program's designed to do, the answers are become very
Mhm.
clear. And when you're very clear, everything else that's a distraction
Mhm.
isn't attractive anymore. Oh, that doesn't concern me because this is where I'm going. It just gives you that clarity and focus that
Mhm.
no other program, nothing else I've ever done has done
Mhm.
for me. And
Mhm.
so
Yeah.
really amazing. So
Yeah. And
mm,
one of the things, I have a real unfair advantage with this, and that is, for the most part, entrepreneurs don't like their past.
mm,
I would say one of the greatest motivations that most entrepreneurs have is to get away from their past, get away from
wow.
their past. And I just take them back there. I just take them back into the past. So tell me, when did you do this? How'd that turn out? What'd you do this?
Yeah.
And all day long, I'm just taking them back into their past
Wow.
because there's gold back there. And
Yeah.
I'm just allowing them to create a history that they really like about past, their past life, and put it together in new lesson
Yeah.
plans and put it together into new strategic pathways. But it's all their material is what fills up the forms.
Yeah. That's amazing. Yeah. And it is. It's just like the 10x exercise where we realize, hey, we've done this a bunch of times throughout our life already. Now we're just doing it again. It makes
Yeah.
it so much less scary and less and more
Well, it's
real
yours. It's
that,
yours.
oh, I have done this. Look at that.
Yeah.
And we
It's
don't
your
stop
material.
and look back and
Yeah.
really recognize what we've
Yeah.
accomplished.
Yeah. I got to this really early. I grew up on a farm in Ohio, produce farm, and next door was a dairy farm. And so we got our milk from the farm, and they bought vegetables from us. And but the woman, I remember it because I was 8 years old and she was 78, and she had been born in 1874. Okay. And, no technology whatsoever. It was all hard work and animals, and um, and I would go over and get the milk, and I knew if I could get her talking, I'd get milk and cookies. And so I had my eye on the prize, and so I'd go in and I said, Mrs. Wetzel, um, how could a farm run without electricity? And then she talked about the kerosene lamps, and she talked about the coal for the furnace and everything like that. And then, what did a work day look like? You didn't have any tractors, you didn't have trucks, you know, didn't have radio, didn't have movies, didn't all the stuff that floods our life these days. And and um, and and I'd ask her questions, I mean, what's the same now as it was back then? I came out, I think I was born with strategic coach questions in my brain,
Yeah.
and periodically, my Mrs. Wetzel would call my mother on the phone, and she said, you're Danny. He comes over and he gets me thinking about things I've never thought about. And she says, I always feel good afterwards. Well, it took me 22 more years to create a business model, but I'm still doing at 80 what I was doing at 8. I just really that you can ask people questions about their experience, and they create lesson plans out of their out of their answers.
Yeah.
They start putting experiences together that they had never thought about before. And I think that this has been a constant activity for me since I was conscious. That
Yeah.
I'm always fascinated in how people can redesign their past to create a better future.
Yeah. And it works. So, and
Yeah.
that's I love the line that I forget who you told it to at Genius that um AI asks you question or the flip of
No,
it.
they wanted me to create a chatbot
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
and I said, they don't want to ask me questions. They want me to ask them questions.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly,
yeah. I
exactly.
said
Yeah.
we
That's
tried a bot. Nobody was interested.
so
Nobody wanted.
profound. Yeah.
No. They don't want to know what's going on in my head. They want to know what's going on in their head.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The way you ask the questions is just magic. It's unlike anybody else asking them.
Well, first of all, I'm really interested.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not a trick. You know, I get an enormous amount of value out of understanding how other people use their past to create their future. And that's really, in an essence, we allow you to use your entire entrepreneurial past to create new strategies and new capabilities for the future.
Yeah. Yeah. So, uh, amazing. Can I ask you another personal question?
You can
So,
ask me anything you
okay,
want.
so you brought up divorce and bankruptcy and stuff, and I even jokingly teased my wife that hey, maybe we should look into this because most of the really, really successful people I know have been through some form of trauma,
Oh,
uh,
yeah.
whether, shake up. And I'm wondering, as I'm studying this phenomenon, do you think it's like a trampoline where the further down you fall, the higher you bounce up? Or do you think it toughens you up or teaches you a lesson? Or is it just that you're taking bigger swings and knowing more what you want and that kind of thing? Like, can you?
Yeah, I think all of that, everything you're talking about. I mean, I hear the horror stories, in different situations, people, and I said I had a on a scale of 1 to 10, unhappy or happy. I was born into a 10 life. I
Hmm,
had great parents.
yeah.
Interesting. It's birth order because a lot of entrepreneurs are first children. They're the oldest, and they were thrust through circumstances at a very young age that they had to create money. They had to create money, and maybe failure in their family. It could have been, you know, all sorts of things. But I had two parents, and the one thing that's really different in 2025 than in the 1940s and 1950s, you weren't friends. Your parents weren't your friends.
Hmm.
Your
Yeah.
parents were your parents, not quite God, but they were between you and God. And but because I was interested in my mom and dad, I was interested in what their childhood was like. I had a kind of a different relationship. So I'm a fifth child, but so are they. My mother's the fifth of
Oh, okay.
seven, and my father's the fifth of nine. And I think that there
Wow.
was enormous amount of common ground, just person to person, and and I really took advantage of that. I mean, I know things about my parents that I have five living siblings, and they don't know any of this stuff. I know it all.
Wow.
I know what my mother's childhood was like, what the teenage years were like, and and a woman, a female in 1910 is in very different circumstances than someone today, and
Yeah.
everything. And I just appreciate that she was very smart. My dad was very smart. They were great role models for just being honest and being fair and being, protective. And I gained an enormous advantage just because I had that kind of childhood. But I've had, I was divorced and bankrupt, and you know, what I noticed really quickly is that I was the only one unhappy.
Wow.
You know,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm not, I don't think I've really had trauma as I've had setbacks, I've had
Yeah,
defeats,
that's
I've,
the wrong
I've
word, but
had
yeah.
failures, but who doesn't?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But that's all learning, I mean, usually things are really painful if you haven't gotten the lesson. In other words, you had a painful experience
Yeah.
and you've named some of yours, but the pain is still there if you didn't learn anything. The moment you go into a past experience and you take it apart, put it back together, what worked about it, what didn't work about it. Now, what have I gained because I had that experience that I can apply to the future so I don't have to go through that type of pain in the future? I think that's not entrepreneurial, that's just human.
Yeah. Is your experience Transformer, is that based on your military background with
No,
the
no, it was based on
MF?
an in that's a great way. It was an incident. And this is if you had to pick one story from Dan Sullivan's life that kind of tells you Dan Sullivan's approach to life. I'm going to tell you the one. I was writing a book, and I've always been kind of sloppy about saving things and making sure that if you create something, you've secured it. So I was on a when we were just opening the London office, UK. So we have a real thriving community in the UK and places to the east. They come from Italy, they come from Israel, they come from Pakistan, they come from Africa and India. And it was a late, very, very late flight. It was a day flight from Toronto to London, and thus I was on stage first thing in the morning. So I had a Mac, and Mac. I've been a Mac guy from the beginning. And so I gave my talk in the morning at the hotel where we were staying. And then, you're jet lagged and you're out of whack. You haven't eaten properly. So we went out for a long lunch and I came back. And my hotel room uh, had been broken into. The door handle was just destroyed. Okay. And I mean, it was just the door handle was on the floor and it was just somebody who really knew how to do it, knew that one really good kick, you can open a door. And they stole my Mac, but I had a book and I was just finishing the book and it had to be sent to my team for final editing the next week in Toronto. And so I came back and the hotel was pretty useless. They didn't, yeah, must happen a lot because they didn't make a big deal out of it.
Yeah.
And the police came and said, it's gone. It's on its way to Russia probably. And so then we had a dinner that night that we had to go and we had clients. So here I am. I've just had my Mac stolen and I've got a deadline for the next Friday. This was a Friday. It was the next Friday. And so Babs was just really tired. She went to bed. And I was sitting there and I said, how do I recreate the book that I just lost? Okay, I had no other file for it. And
Wow.
I was sitting there, it was about 1 or 2 in the morning. And I said, I have absolutely no energy of recreating that book. But what if I just created a brand new book and wrote it in 1 week? And fortunately, I had my top tech guy with me, and he had a Mac just like mine. And you had a software program. It's like InDesign today. You can lay out an entire book. And I met with him for about 2 or 3 hours, and we created the complete layout for the book. And then we were 5 hours ahead because London is in a different. So I said, I bet between now and next Thursday, when he was flying back to Toronto, I can create a whole new book and give him the file, and I'll meet my deadline. And I knocked it off.
Wow.
Um, and it was a much better book. It was a much better book. And I said, wow. I said, I had no energy for trying to bring back what was gone, but I had enormous energy for creating something new.
Wow.
So on the way back to Toronto a couple of weeks later, we were there for 2 weeks. Um, I said to myself, "This is an important lesson that you just discovered." Okay. And I created it. It was called the negativity transformer when we first started. It wasn't called experience
Okay.
transformer. And I found that you can do this with good experiences as well as bad
Yeah.
experiences. And it's been a real enormous. And what it is, just 3 columns. You write what was the experience, then you write down what was good about this experience. Well, most people would say there's nothing good about that experience. I said, no, I got a whole new book out of it. What do you mean? This is a really good book. But I was very proud of the way that I had just flipped. I had, you know, and what I got from this experience is find out where the energy is, and the energy was doing something new,
Yeah.
getting it done. And my team back at home was just, they were thrilled. They were thrilled that I did that. They were, because we had to have that book for a big conference every year. And we always had something new. And so I did that. And I began to realize that you can do that with any experience in your life.
Hmm.
If you go back and you say, now what was good about the experience? And most people say, well, it was a bad experience, nothing good about it. There's always something good about the
Yeah.
experience. And then what didn't work, and then all of a sudden, never lost another book after that, never lost my laptop. So there was steps to be taken.
Yeah.
And so I got his Mac. I got my tech guy's Mac. He had same technology. But every time I finished writing, I went down to the hotel, moved hotels because that
Yeah.
hotel wasn't really supportive. And I said, "Can you put this in your safe while I'm away?" And I'd be out for 2 or 3 hours and come back.
Yeah.
And I said, "No, no, I always protect my computer now. I always did that."
Yeah.
But when people talk about trauma, and they talk about this and that, I said, it won't change itself. When you have a bad experience, it's not going to change itself, but you can transform it if you want, if you want.
Yeah.
I would say that story kind of tells you who I am.
Yeah. Yeah. That's neat. Wow. It's really good.
Yeah, no, I
Yeah.
mean,
And that's,
and entrepreneurs have this more than other people, that that hard knock, it's a school of hard knocks.
yeah. Yeah.
You get it. But what do you do since you got the hard knock? What are you going to do with the knock? There's still energy in there, but you got
Yeah.
to change your way of thinking. You got to change how you're doing it. And
Well, if you
that,
don't take that time to transform it, you're doomed to repeat it.
that or you're down in the bar.
Yeah. 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 So,
Yeah. Have you
uh,
had something like that where you just flipped it?
yeah. Yeah. I actually I was cyber bullied a little bit and, it crushed me. I'd never been picked on or anything. And, you know, it, I was getting really depressed and really down. And then I realized it brought me closer to my faith. It broke my addiction to social media. It did. There
Oh,
were
no.
so many good things that had
One
I
of the
not
great,
gone through that, I would have
one of the great
never
experiences of your life.
learned those things. So yeah, and that's where I was wondering, like, is that trampoline effect where, you
No,
know,
I think it's an escalator effect.
okay.
I,
Cool.
I
Yeah.
think you go to another level.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Right.
it
Yeah.
not only made you capable
Yeah.
with that particular situation, but it made you capable of any kind of bad
Oh
situation.
yeah, I'm much tougher. I'm much more. I know what's important to me now. Like it fixed all my priorities. Like it did, you could say my enemies did more for me than my friends ever have, like for transformation. So it's
Yeah,
kind of weird how that stuff
yeah.
works
But
out.
you
But if
took
I
you
didn't
took
analyze it, it wouldn't have.
you took ownership.
Yeah.
It's yours. It's yours to deal with. I mean, nobody else can live your experience. You're the only person who has access to
Yeah.
the experience, but you can do things. And I think that's what entrepreneurism really is all about. Things aren't working somewhere, and an entrepreneur comes up with a solution, to do that. Yeah. Another one was COVID. I remember in 2020, so it's 5 years now. Um, uh, March 13th, 2020. And we were already getting cancellations into the this was our Toronto office. We have a Chicago and a Los Angeles office, and then London. So we have the four. And somebody asked me the question, can you ever see Strategic Coach being digital? Can you ever see doing? I said, no. I said, I just don't see it. I just don't think it. So that was the 13th of August. On the 13th of March, 2020. And we were in Chicago, and Babs and the team members got together and said, we're going to have to close everything down for 3 months because there's so much uncertainty. We're only getting 10% show up rate. And this is our cash flow, this is our cash flow. And so this was Friday night. We were flying back to Toronto, and I was really tired from the week. And then I said, oh my God, what do we go to? It's our entire cash flow. So, and then halfway through, I said, well, it's going to be 100% Zoom. We got to make the switch. 3 months later, we had the entire program entirely transformed. All the workshops, all the concepts, everything was
Wow.
transformed.
Yeah.
And we took a real hit, as most people did. We lost 40%, but we were still even. So we lost all of our profitability. But boy, what Zoom has done, just having that experience.
Yeah.
Zoom is one of the great gifts of my entrepreneurial life.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, and we really went out and we created many more workshops, mini workshops, 1 hour workshops, 2 hour workshops, and everything. Would have done nothing like that if we hadn't had that experience.
Yeah. That's one of the things that I missed out on. I had the idea early on to make, I was going to call it a Zoom box, kind of like the old boom box that you'd listen to, but it was just going to be just like a tablet with a really good camera and a really good mic specifically for doing Zooms. And I thought, somebody else will beat me to it and whatever. And here we are years later, nobody still has just done that. So I think maybe I, could have hit a wall or something, but
Well, no,
honestly,
it wasn't the crucial thing at the time,
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. I mean, but our Zoom sessions are just like our live sessions. I call on everybody. Everybody talks, and I never ask for ideas. I'll say, Dave, yeah, this thing we're talking about, what's your thoughts about that? And Dave, Dave comes alive, and I've never met. I had only one person in 5 years when I called upon them and say, what do you think about what we're talking about here? That one person said, I don't have anything to say. And then about an hour, half hour later, he said, I've got something to say. But everybody talks. It's very, very interactive.
yeah. Oh yeah,
It's not TV, it's interactive.
yeah.
I love it. I mean, I'm so thankful and grateful that we had that challenge came along and we had to respond. We couldn't respond to it 50%. It had to be 100%.
Yeah, yeah,
Now that live is back in, people prefer live to virtual.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But you did an amazing, amazing job through that whole transition. From the customer's perspective, I just to tell you, like, the transition of going to Zoom, you guys framed it and rolled it out in such a high level way that,
Mhm.
we got full value and
Yep.
everything. And yeah, I was relieved when we got back in person, but um, it's I think that is more of like you taught me, it's not always what's taught, it's what's caught.
Yeah.
And some of my big breakaways, or takeaways, whatever, are walking to the bathroom, chatting one-on-one with somebody, or in line at lunch and somebody says something that, you're like, oh, it clicks, and so some of those kind of magic moments of the in-person
Mhm.
makes the difference. But like I said, the as a whole, from the other side, I'm sure there was some chaos in the back
Yeah.
end that we didn't see, but we didn't feel it on the front end at all. So it was
Yeah,
really
it's really interesting that we had a significant number who stayed with it, because they were having to do the same thing with their business.
Hmm.
Okay. And they were, um, a lot of the way that we went about it had a great influence on how they set up their Zoom calls. We thought that was part of the, look, this is life,
Yeah.
life just, the best card players aren't the ones who get the best deals.
Mm.
They're just really good at playing whatever cards they get. And that's,
Yeah.
yeah, we don't get a choice of what kind of deals we get in life. Okay.
Yeah.
But we have complete choice of how we're going to play the hand. And I think that's pure entrepreneurism. It doesn't matter what cards I get,
Yeah.
I'm going to fold when I need to fold, and I'm going to bet when I need to bet.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people have not developed. Uh, you can really see this in the news and then and social media that life was supposed to be easy. And as long as they have that attitude, life is going to be really hard.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Life is just life. What we do with it is what makes the difference.
Yeah.
Yeah. So 30 years, you're 30 years entrepreneurial now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what's the same about you now that was the same when you started?
Oh, interesting. Probably just trying to be as helpful as I can and caring a lot. I would say that's never changed no matter what industry I'm in or what I'm doing. It's caring about the people and trying to be as helpful as possible and provide real value. I think that stays consistent no matter what project I'm working on or who I'm around.
Mhm. Yeah.
So
Yeah. Be useful.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's a good rule.
It's
Yeah. Is that
yeah.
an aquarium in the background with the wheels?
No, a little popcorn machine.
Oh, popcorn. Yeah. I was seeing if there were fish floating around there.
Yeah. Too funny, too funny. So, Dan, thank you for the gift of being here. Is there anything that I'm going to ask you a question, then I want you to ask me a question to end it. So I'll explain in a second. But is there anything that I should have asked you that I didn't? Or anything you want to share?
That wasn't my job today.
Okay, perfect. Cool. So if you
Yeah,
don't
I
mind,
would, yeah, I would say that we're just putting one of our small quarterly books to bed over the next week.
okay.
And it's a really interesting book. It's called The Bill of Rights Economy.
Hmm.
And it's from the Constitution, the US Constitution. And it's the 10 amendments, the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. And I live in Canada. I mean, most of my time I live in Canada. But I've been 54 years, I've been outside. We're there all the time. We have a home in Chicago and,
Yeah.
do the workshop and we travel a lot. And the vast majority of our clients are American. And I said, if you look at the period when the country was founded and the Constitution became official in 1791, that's when it was official, and the government started. Washington was the president. And it always struck me that there was something about these first 10 amendments that was made the country really unique. And so we wrote a book, and it's got um, 5 ways that each of the amendment, uh, um, I would say, uniquely supported and encouraged entrepreneurism. And if you look at who the people are that are considered the founders, well, they didn't work. They didn't have corporations back then. Everybody had their own business. Some of them not even legal
Yeah.
businesses. You know, and so I said that, and I wrote 10 chapters, one for each amendment, and I showed 5 ways that the Constitution actually supports entrepreneurism, and that their whole notion was that their number one job as founders was to protect entrepreneurism and entrepreneurs from being interfered with by the government.
Hmm.
And it's the document is actually there to protect the people from the government. And I would say we're on a real upswing. We're on a real upswing now, is that entrepreneurism now is the dominant force, certainly in American society.
Yeah.
Not so much in Canada, not so much in the UK, but
Hmm.
here. And so at 80, I feel that it's been 50 since I started coaching. It's 50 years. And I said, it's all R&D to just be alive for
Hmm.
what's happening in the world right now. I think
Yeah.
this is the main, and it's taken that long for entrepreneurism to get the central position in American society. So it's a and and you can tell that uh, those who really love bureaucracy are not real happy today.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, there's this guy. He's got orange hair, and he's in the White House, and he's just pure entrepreneur. He's just.
Yeah.
They say he's the weirdest president. I said, no, I've been living and working with these people for 50 years. I know exactly what he's doing.
Yeah.
He's just being an entrepreneur, and yeah,
Yeah.
he's got everybody. Yeah, you love him or you hate him.
Yeah. It
He,
goes
he
back
has no
to,
room for, he has no room for the middle.
yep. Yep.
Yeah. Well, this is a real treat, and you're the only event for my week because I'm recuperating from um, some advanced health and fitness treatments in Argentina. We just came back, so my Becca, who um, is my controller, she controls my schedule.
Yeah.
She said, "What about this project?" I said, "No, I'm going to do it." I told him I'd do it. If I was in Phoenix, I'd be doing it. So
Yeah.
we do it.
I,
So you're the only event of my week.
I really appreciate it, as do the listeners, I'm sure. So thank you so much, Dan. So if you don't mind, I'm going to force you. I know. So the first time we met in person, you asked me a question, and I've read a book about it and everything, the R factor question.
Mhm.
So if you don't mind
I
asking
will. I will.
the listeners that, then I think
Yeah.
that'd be a fitting way to end the podcast.
Yeah, so it's April 30th, 2025. If we were having this discussion and it was 3 years from today, April 30th in 2028, what has to happen, Dave, in your life, both personally and professionally, for you to feel happy with your progress?
So powerful. And I encourage every listener to do that mental exercise and maybe even take pen to paper with it because it's a powerful question.
Yeah.
It's changed my life. And the last thing I'll say too is when I joined Strategic Coach, it was dollars and cents. I was, hey, I'm spending, this much money. When do I see that back plus the gain and whatever? And that's how I looked at it completely. And uh looking back, like, I'm a better husband, I'm a better father, I'm a better friend. And yeah, the money came, but it was like, to me, that's almost the strategic byproduct of what you learn and
Yep.
experience being a
Yeah.
coach. So thank you for that. And thank you for this gift of being here today. And just thanks for everything, Dan.
Thank you. Thank you, Dave. See you.
Yep. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks so much for listening to this special conversation with Dan Sullivan. If something resonated with you, don't just think about it, take action. Visit authorsummaries.com to watch the video, grab Dan's book, The Self-Managing Company, or schedule a quick call with Dave to see if Strategic Coach is the right next step for you. If you want help distilling big ideas like Dan's into actionable insights, reach out. Dave would love to support your journey. And if you're ready to dive in, head straight to strategiccoach.com to connect with their amazing team. Please mention the podcast so Dan knows his time was well spent. Thanks for tuning in to Author Summaries. Until next time, keep creating a bigger future.